My husband secretly had a second wife, so I exposed him to everyone, the shocking discovery that turned my perfect marriage into a nightmare. So, imagine finding out that the person you trusted more than anyone in this world, your partner, had been living a double life. That's exactly what happened to me. I was married to this guy for almost 10 years, and I thought we had the perfect relationship. But then I found out he had a second wife, and not just some fling. No, he had a whole second life with a woman and kids. I felt like the ground beneath me had just disappeared. You can't even begin to imagine how I felt, but what I did next, that's a whole different story. Part 1. The picture-perfect life. So, let me start by telling you a little bit about my life before all of this went down. Everything seemed perfect. I met my husband, let's call him Jack, when I was in my mid-20s. I was working a regular job at a marketing firm, living in a cozy apartment in the city, and honestly, I thought life was going pretty well. I wasn't rich, but I had everything I needed. Jack was the kind of guy who made you feel special. He was charming, funny, and I was completely smitten. We got married after about 3 years of dating, and we both talked about starting a family soon. He'd always joke around about us versus the world, and how no one would understand our bond, but I honestly didn't mind. It felt sweet, like he really thought I was the one. He was always there for me, never too busy for a chat, always making time for date nights, and he even supported me when I decided to quit my job to start my own small business. Things were good, you know? Or at least I thought they were. He never gave me a reason to doubt him, but looking back now, there were little things I should have noticed. The way he would suddenly disappear for hours, or how he'd get really defensive whenever I asked about his past. But hey, I didn't want to overthink things. He had a solid job, a good reputation, and from all outward appearances, we were happy. We were that couple everyone looked up to. But, as you'll see, life can be really good at hiding its ugly truths behind a perfect smile, and I was about to find out that my perfect life wasn't as perfect as I thought. Part 2. The first hint. Everything started to unravel one evening when I was at home, just minding my own business. Jack had left for a business trip that he was always going on, some conference or meeting or whatever. To be honest, I didn't think much of it. He was always traveling for work, so I was used to him being gone for a couple of days. But on this particular night, I had a weird feeling. You know that gut feeling? The one that tells you something is off, even if you don't have any proof. Yeah, I got that feeling. I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw a post from a mutual friend of Jack's, someone I'd never met in person. It was a picture of Jack, with a woman I didn't recognize. She was sitting next to him at a restaurant, and they were smiling, laughing. They looked way too cozy. At first, I thought it was maybe an old photo from one of those business trips, but something about it didn't sit right with me. The picture had been posted that same day, and it was tagged with a location I knew Jack wasn't near. So, of course, my curiosity got the best of me, and I zoomed in on the photo. The woman's face seemed familiar, but I couldn't place her. It was like I had seen her in passing at some point, but I didn't know who she was. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who was this woman? Why did Jack not mention her? He had to have known I'd see it, right? The next day, I casually asked him about the trip. He brushed it off, telling me it was just another boring conference. But I kept thinking about that picture. It didn't make sense. Why didn't he tell me about the woman? Why didn't he mention her? At this point, I wasn't even jumping to conclusions yet, but my mind was definitely starting to wander. I wasn't a paranoid person, but my gut was telling me something was up. Something didn't add up, and I was going to figure it out. Part 3. The discovery. Okay, so now that I had that weird feeling in my gut, I couldn't shake it. I tried to put it out of my mind, but I couldn't. So, after a few days of obsessing over the photo, I decided to do something I had never done before. I went through his stuff. I know, it's not the best move, but when you get a feeling like that, logic kinda goes out the window. I figured if I didn't do something about it, I'd just go crazy wondering. I started with his work bag, which had been lying around the house. He wasn't home at the time, so I had a window of opportunity. I opened it up, and as expected, it was full of business documents, some old receipts, and a few hotel room keys. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But then I found something that made my heart stop. It was a receipt for a hotel, one I'd never seen before, and it was for a place in a city that wasn't even close to where Jack had told me he was. I stared at the receipt, trying to make sense of it. The hotel wasn't a chain, and the location was pretty random. My mind started to race, and I immediately began Googling the place. It was a small boutique hotel, but what caught my eye was the address. I had never heard of it before, but I knew it wasn't anywhere near the conference Jack was supposed to be attending. That's when it hit me. There was no business trip. He was lying to me. But that wasn't even the worst part. No, the worst part was when I decided to check his phone later that evening. I wasn't proud of it, but I was desperate to know the truth. When I unlocked his phone, I saw something I wasn't prepared for. There it was. A message exchange between Jack and the woman in the picture. But it wasn't just a simple, "Hey, how's it going?" kind of thing. No, these messages were intimate. They were talking about things that sounded way too personal for someone who was just a friend of his. And there was a part of the conversation where Jack mentioned how much he missed her and how much he couldn't wait to see her again. That was when I realized I wasn't the only woman in Jack's life. It was all coming together now. The secret trips, the hidden messages, and that random hotel receipt. My heart shattered in that moment. And the worst part was, I had no idea how long this had been going on. Part 4, the confrontation. I couldn't keep it together anymore. The lies, the betrayal, it was all too much. I needed answers. So, when Jack came home that evening, I was ready. I had the evidence in my hands, the receipts, the messages, everything. I didn't even wait for him to get settled in. I just blurted it out. "Who is she?" His face went pale, and for a split second I thought maybe he'd come clean. Maybe he'd be honest with me for once. But no. Instead, he immediately started with the defensive responses. "What are you talking about?" he asked, but his voice cracked. He knew I was on to him. I held up the hotel receipt and his phone, showing him the messages. His expression changed from shock to panic, and that's when I knew. He was guilty as sin. At first, he tried to deny everything. He said it was a mistake, that it was just a fling during a rough patch, and he swore it meant nothing. He claimed I was overreacting and misinterpreting the messages, but as he spoke, his voice was shaky, and I could see the guilt written all over his face. But here's the thing. I didn't need him to confess. I already knew everything. The pieces were all there, and now that I had confirmed it, I couldn't just pretend everything was fine. I wasn't going to let him spin this into some sob story about how he made a mistake, and I should forgive him. So I looked him in the eyes and said, "This isn't just a mistake. This is betrayal, and I'm done." He kept pleading with me, asking me to listen, to understand, but honestly, I couldn't hear him anymore. My trust was gone, and that was something I couldn't get back. I told him to pack his things and leave. I couldn't stand the sight of him. He protested at first, begging me to work things out. But I was already done. I had spent years believing in him, and he had lied to my face for who knows how long. He was gone before the night was over. I can't even begin to describe how empty I felt in that moment. It wasn't just about the fact that he had a second wife. It was the realization that I didn't really know the man I had married. I had trusted him completely, and he had turned out to be someone else entirely. But I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to be some victim. No, I had a plan. Part 5, the second wife. Once Jack left, I was left with a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal, but also an overwhelming sense of clarity. I knew I had to find out more. I couldn't just let this go without understanding the full picture. It wasn't enough to know that Jack had been seeing another woman. No, I needed to know who she was, how long this had been going on, and if she was as blindsided as I had been. So I did some digging. I started with social media, because let's face it, these days everything is out there if you know where to look. I found her pretty quickly. Her name was Rachel, and she had a whole profile filled with photos of her and Jack. It wasn't just casual either. These weren't photos from a work event or a business trip. These were intimate moments, vacations, family dinners, all of them marked with hashtags like #OurLife and #Forever. I sat there for a while, staring at these pictures, feeling like a fool. How could I have been so blind? How could Jack have carried on like everything was fine with us while living this entire life on the side? I couldn't help myself. I reached out. I sent her a message, something simple but direct. "I'm Jack's wife. I think we need to talk." Now, let me tell you, this was the part I wasn't sure how it would go. I didn't know if Rachel was aware of me, if she even knew Jack was married. But what happened next shocked me. She responded almost immediately. "Oh my God, I had no idea. I almost couldn't believe it. She said that Jack had told her they were in the process of getting divorced, that he had been separated for months. She had no clue that I even existed. It turns out Jack had been playing both of us, lying to both of us, making us believe things that weren't true. He had completely manipulated Rachel into thinking I was the one holding him back from having a happy life. Now, I don't know about you, but this hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to stop for a second and process it. Rachel wasn't the villain in this story. She was just as much a victim as I was. She had been led to believe Jack was going through a divorce. So, the anger I initially felt toward her quickly shifted. This wasn't her fault. It was Jack's. He had betrayed both of us in different ways and played us against each other like pawns in a game. Rachel and I agreed to meet. We needed to talk face to face. Part 6. The meeting. Meeting Rachel was unexpected. I honestly didn't know what to expect when we arranged to meet up. I thought I might be walking into a confrontation, some kind of showdown between the two women Jack had lied to. But when I saw her, I realized she wasn't my enemy. She was just as confused, hurt, and betrayed as I was. We met at a coffee shop, a neutral place, just the two of us sitting across from each other. Rachel looked a little nervous, but also relieved. She told me she'd been dealing with this whole situation in silence, not knowing who to talk to. I could see the sadness in her eyes as she spoke about how Jack had promised her a future together, a real family, and how they had been talking about moving in together. It sounded eerily familiar, like all the things Jack had said to me when we first started out. The most heartbreaking part? She told me that Jack had started acting strangely in the last few months, pulling away and becoming distant. But like me, she brushed it off as just stress. She never suspected that he was seeing someone else, especially not someone who was already his wife. It was in that moment that I realized we were both victims of the same lie. Jack had been living this double life for months, and neither of us had any idea. We shared stories, exchanged screenshots of messages, and everything matched up. Jack's pattern of manipulation was almost identical with both of us. He would tell Rachel one thing and tell me something else entirely. He played us both like puppets on strings. I think we both knew, deep down, that there was no going back from this. Jack had hurt us both, and we couldn't keep letting him manipulate our lives any longer. After we shared our stories, I felt empowered. It wasn't just about me getting revenge or making Jack suffer. It was about reclaiming our lives and making sure he didn't continue his lies with anyone else. Rachel and I came to a silent agreement that day. We weren't going to let Jack ruin us. We weren't going to let him get away with it. So, we made a pact. We were going to expose him together. Part 7. The plan. After meeting Rachel, something shifted inside me. The anger I felt wasn't as sharp anymore. Instead, I was filled with this cold determination. Jack had tried to control both of us, and now it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. I knew we needed to expose him, together, because if we didn't, he would just keep getting away with it. He'd already lied to us for so long. Who's to say he wouldn't do it again? Rachel and I spent hours talking that day, getting to know each other better and strategizing our next move. It was clear that we were both on the same page. We weren't just doing this for us. We were doing it so that Jack couldn't keep manipulating other women like he had done to us. We were going to bring the truth to light, loud and clear. We decided to approach it in a way that would expose Jack to everyone around him, the people who believed in his perfect image. We started by gathering evidence. Rachel dug through her own photos and messages, and I went through my own documents, receipts, and records from the past couple of years. We needed a clear timeline of everything, from the start of Jack's affair to the lies he had told both of us. There had to be enough proof to make sure nobody could dismiss us as crazy exes or jealous women. The next part of the plan was crucial. We had to get to Jack's closest circle, the people who trusted him, the friends who would never imagine Jack would betray them. He had to be exposed for the kind of person he really was, not just to us, but to everyone he had fooled. It was time for his perfect life to come crashing down. We decided to go public with everything. But we weren't just going to post on social media, we were going bigger. We knew that exposing him in front of his family and friends would hit him where it hurt the most. We had to take away the foundation he had built for years, the one that allowed him to lie without facing the consequences. We gathered screenshots, photos, hotel receipts, anything that would show the world exactly who Jack was. I won't lie, part of me felt a little nervous, like maybe we were going too far. But then I thought about all the lies, all the times Jack had gaslit me, and all the hurt he caused Rachel and me. No, this wasn't too far. He needed to be held accountable. Once everything was set up, we decided to send out a message to his friends, family, and co-workers. We wanted to make sure everyone who had trusted him, everyone who looked up to him, knew exactly what kind of man he really was. We drafted an honest, unfiltered message that told the whole story. Our story. The truth about his double life. The truth about his lies. The truth that no one had ever seen because Jack had been hiding behind his perfect image. It was time to let the world know who he really was. Part 8. The Fallout. The moment we hit send on that message was like a weight lifting off my chest. It was scary, sure, but in that instant I felt empowered. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't holding back. I was letting the world know the truth. We started getting responses almost immediately. I think I expected some of Jack's friends to defend him, maybe make excuses or try to downplay everything, but that didn't happen. It was like the floodgates opened, and people who had been suspicious of him for years started coming forward. One friend shared a message where Jack had once bragged about keeping his options open. Another coworker revealed that Jack had been making excuses to skip out on family events, claiming he was working late, when, in fact, he was with Rachel. It was like everyone had been waiting for someone to speak up. Once one person spoke out, others followed. It became this chain reaction. And before long, Jack's perfect life started crumbling in front of him. His phone was blowing up with messages, mostly angry and disgusted responses from people he had once considered close. Then came the really hard part. His family. His parents were devastated. They called me immediately, trying to understand what had happened. They couldn't believe it, but the evidence didn't lie. I had to explain to them that Jack had been lying to everyone, and that's when the truth hit me the hardest. It wasn't just me and Rachel who had been hurt. It was everyone who had trusted Jack. It was his family, his friends, his co-workers. He had manipulated all of them. Jack didn't take this well, obviously. He reached out to me, begging for forgiveness, but there was no way I was going to forgive him after everything that had happened. He tried to spin the story, claim he was confused, or that he didn't know what he was doing. He even went as far as accusing me of trying to ruin his life. But by this point, I had no sympathy left. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, it had all piled up, and there was no going back. He tried to call Rachel too. He begged her to talk, to explain himself. She didn't even answer his calls. I didn't blame her. Neither of us owed him anything anymore. What surprised me, though, was the response from some of Jack's friends. A few of them actually apologized. Some said they had suspected something was off, but had no idea how deep it went. It was bizarre, honestly. These people had known Jack for years, and none of them had seen through his act until it was too late. I guess Jack was really good at playing the part of the good guy. The whole thing felt like a nightmare, but also like a twisted form of justice. Watching his world collapse, seeing him lose the trust of everyone he had fooled, was a strange kind of satisfaction. It didn't undo the hurt or the years of lies, but it did give me closure. Jack had to face what he had done. He couldn't hide behind his charming personality anymore. The truth was out there. But of course, the story didn't end there. Part 9, the aftermath. After all the fallout, things felt surreal. The dust had settled, but I was left with this feeling of emptiness, like everything I'd known had been shattered. I had exposed Jack for what he was, and that felt like a victory in some ways, but it didn't change the fact that my entire life had been a lie. I had been married to someone who had been deceiving me for years. And Rachel? Well, she was in the same boat. Jack tried to salvage whatever he could. I got a couple of texts from him, asking if we could talk things through or clear the air, but at that point, I had no interest in anything he had to say. There was no talking through a betrayal like that. Nothing he could say would change the fact that he had lied to me, to Rachel, to everyone around him. I spent the next few weeks reflecting on everything. What was I supposed to do now? I had to rebuild my life. But the truth was, I felt stronger than I ever had before. I was no longer just the wife who had been blindsided by her husband's lies. I had taken control. I had made sure Jack couldn't keep up his charade, and most importantly, I was free. But I'd be lying if I said it was easy. There were days when I questioned myself, wondering if I had done the right thing by exposing Jack. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe I should have just walked away quietly and healed in private. But no. After everything he had put me through, I knew I had done the right thing. The truth needed to come out, and Jack needed to face the consequences. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person he had deceived and manipulated. Then, something surprising happened. Rachel reached out to me again. She had taken some time to process everything, and when she did, she sent me a message saying she wanted to meet up. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I agreed. When we sat down together again, I could see she was in a better place, stronger, more at peace with herself. She had done a lot of thinking, and the truth was, she was moving on. We shared a lot of laughs that day. We talked about how crazy everything had been, how we both had been living in these parallel universes of lies, and how we were finally free from the burden of Jack's manipulation. It was comforting to know that Rachel was okay, that she was healing too. We agreed that we weren't going to let this define us. We were going to take control of our futures. As for Jack, well, he was still out there, but he was no longer a part of my life. I didn't care what he was doing, who he was with, or how he was handling his fallout. That wasn't my problem anymore. I had closed that chapter. Part 10. Moving on. Months passed, and life slowly started to return to a sense of normalcy. The pain from everything that had happened still lingered, but it wasn't as raw as it had been. I'd had time to process, to heal, and to rediscover who I was without the weight of Jack's lies hanging over me. The process wasn't instant, but with each passing day, I felt stronger. I took some time for myself, focused on what made me happy, and reconnected with old friends and family. I had spent so many years putting Jack first, so it felt good to remind myself that I was allowed to prioritize my own happiness. I traveled. I worked on projects I had set aside, and slowly but surely, I started feeling like me again. One of the most empowering things I did was start therapy. I needed someone to help me unpack everything that had happened, to make sense of the emotional roller coaster I'd been on. And honestly, it helped more than I ever could have imagined. Talking to someone who wasn't involved in the situation, who could offer a fresh perspective, made a huge difference. It wasn't about seeking revenge anymore. It was about healing and reclaiming my life. A few months in, I began dating again. At first, I was hesitant. How could I trust someone after everything that had happened? But I met someone who was kind, genuine, and patient. He wasn't looking to rush anything, and that gave me the space to go at my own pace. I didn't need him to fix me. I wasn't broken anymore. But the companionship, the feeling of being truly seen and respected, was something I had missed. As for Jack, well, he eventually faded from my life completely. I heard bits and pieces through mutual friends, but I didn't care to know. His world had crumbled, and he had to live with the mess he had created. I had done my part. The truth had come out. The betrayal had been exposed. There was no going back for him, and honestly, I didn't want to look back either. Rachel and I still keep in touch. We've become good friends, something I never expected when this whole ordeal began. We both came out of this experience with more strength, more resilience, and a deeper understanding of our own worth. We had both been hurt by the same person, but now we were living proof that we could rebuild our lives, stronger than before, and that's the thing. I've realized that the only person I can truly rely on in this world is myself. I don't need validation from anyone. I don't need approval. I don't need to live up to some ideal that others have set for me. I'm enough, just as I am. So, to anyone going through something similar, don't let the actions of one person define your entire life. You're not the sum of their lies. You're stronger than you think. And you have the power to reclaim your happiness, no matter how impossible it may seem at first. Jack thought he could tear me down, but all he did was help me realize how much power I truly had. If you've made it this far, I hope this story has shown you the power of standing up for yourself, no matter how hard it may seem. Trust me, you are stronger than any betrayal that comes your way. If you've ever experienced something similar, or if you've just found strength in hearing this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Share your experiences, your advice, or anything that resonates with you. If you've learned something from this journey, don't keep it to yourself. Let others know. And if this story helped you in any way, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Remember, you're not alone. Take control of your life and don't let anyone dim your light. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and never stop fighting for your happiness. Until next time, take care.